Hi, this is Nora Bird, and we're going to talk about Session 3, Embedded Librarianship, for our community college's More Relevant Than Ever e-learning course. I hope you like this format, and I hope that you will respond to the discussion board, which is a voice thread, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. This is my agenda: a little history, new models for reference provision, some of which are old, just refurbished, and we'll talk about information literacy and embedded librarianship. Just to let you know, I'm using a screencasting software called Screencast-O-Matic. I may have to split this lecture into two pieces because it will only allow me to do 15 minutes at a time. Let's see what we can get accomplished in these 15 minutes. First, a little history. We just need to look at reference services in general, and then that's what led to embedded librarianship. But reference has evolved pretty steadily ever since it was first discussed, not with the word reference, but in 1896, in the very first issue of Library Journal, when Samuel Swett Green talked about personal relations between librarians and readers. This personal relations is the thread that holds all of the history of reference together. It's not about the desk, although we often call this the reference desk. Although I don't know if you're in your community college, but in lots of community colleges, we have had a combined reference service desk for a lot of years, primarily due to staffing issues, but it really makes sense for people to do circulation and reference in the same area. And this trend has been picked up in many different kinds of libraries now, including some major university libraries. So it's not about the desk. It's about the communication between the librarian and the person who has a question, has a need, has a research project to complete. And that communication can go by whatever means. This is the list of possible ways you can get reference service at the university libraries here at UNCG, where my partner Mike Crumpton and I work. But we have called reference service lots of different phrases. Reference, I like the phrase information counseling, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And some people use the phrase information coaching. And I noticed that Paul's post about advocacy talked about his Book a Librarian service being called, Book a reference coach or something like that. So the idea of coaching, the idea of counseling, the idea of reference, in other words, referring somebody to a particular resource, has all of these phrases have been used over the years to describe this service that we give. I like the term information counselor. It comes from a book by Carol Kuhlthau called Seeking Meaning. And she introduced 5 levels of mediation with patrons. And for her, the level started with organizer. We organize collections so that people can use that collection in a good way, sort of a self-service collection, right? We put things in particular places so that people can find them themselves. The sort of next level, the next level of interaction is called locator. So this might be a one-time interaction where somebody says, can you tell me where to find this particular information? And you say, yes, here's this website, here's this database, here's this book that might answer your question. The next level is identifier. Here's this stuff that will answer your question, and it might be several. It might be a list of stuff that will answer your question. It might be a collection of materials. This might happen over a period of time. You're still identifying materials. You're locating materials for the person. But you're mostly just identifying and leaving it up to the person to plow through the material and create the answers to their questions themselves. The next level is advisor. In this category, we recommend a particular order to the sources. Well, you want to start with an encyclopedia, and then you want to see if you can find some books on the topic, and then you want to see if you can find articles on the topic. So there's an order to the materials, and there's advice about what the best order is, or what. It's not just kind of showing, well, here's a list of databases, but you're explaining what each one of the databases does. And LibGuides, if they're good LibGuides, take that advisor role seriously. The last section is counselor. And in this, Kuhlthau talks about process intervention. So you're there with the patron on a more consistent basis. It's a holistic experience. And this information counselor role is the basis for embedded librarianship, as we'll see in a minute. But first we have to talk about some other roles that libraries take, obviously, and that's instruction and information literacy. Remember, it used to be called bibliographic instruction long ago. Well, some of you won't remember because you're new to the profession. But when I first started out 30 years ago, it was called bibliographic instruction, and it focused on resources. Information literacy instruction is more focused on process, but remember that information literacy is the outcome of the process. You want the person to be information literate at the end of the process that you're bringing that person through the instruction and the exercises and the assessment of the exercises. That's a process that leads to information literacy. And instruction we will talk about next week. So information literacy has standards, we know that. And there are different levels of standards. For community college librarians, I really think it's a good idea for you to get familiar with the ASL standards. A number of you said that you have high school folks that also use the community college. So you want to be aware of what are those high school librarians teaching those students, so that you can build on that or extend that kind of instruction in your own organizations. And we know that the ACRL standards are changing into this more framework idea, but I think they're probably going to get back to some kind of thing that they call standards as well. So there's a framework that will inform a new way of looking at information literacy, including media literacy and digital literacy and visual literacy. All of those kinds of literacy are going to be included and are, accounted for in the framework, but people have to know how to apply those. And so I think that something like the standards is going to come out of that conversation. Remember that there are different purposes for information literacy. There's academic information literacy. Can you write a paper? Can you know how not to plagiarize? Can you cite the sources that you use? That's really academic information literacy. But there's all kinds of other factors included in information literacy. Mike and I do some work on what is called workplace information literacy. So how does what we teach in classrooms get applied in the workplace? And that's very important for people who work with technical college students, etc., because they are going to apply their skills more directly in a workplace than they are in another classroom, an academic classroom, going forward. And I already talked about these different modes of literacy that are all around this central, what I think is central information literacy, but it's how you use information in different modes, in writing, in creating visual materials, etc. I'm going to stop here because the 15 minutes is almost done, and I'm going to go to the rest of the slides in a new video, and it will start with this embedded isn't new slide.